Hey, it's Braden Ruff back with some science stuff over here in Nerd Corner. And this is the neurons that tell time. This is interesting. This is something in your brain. This is from the NewYorker.com. Discovery of brain structures that apparently mark time has raised a larger question. What is time anyway? Yeah, is time really a human construct, or does it really exist and it's just our perception of it that's a human construct? In June 2007, Albert Tsao, a 19-year-old native of Silver Spring, Maryland, was working in Trondheim, Norway at the Calvi Institute for Systems Neuroscience. Tsao was a summer intern in the lab of May Britt and Edvar Moser, married researchers who are well known in the neurology circles for discovering grid cells, neurons that by tracking our position create a navigational map in the brain. Oh, okay. So I guess if you don't have many, this is part of why you can't find your way home. In an area of brain that medical called the medial, I forget it, cortex. So I was curious about the relatively uncharted region next door, the lateral I hate Latin. After planting tiny electrodes in the LEC of some rats, he set them foraging for bits of chocolate cereal in a series of boxes, some black, some white. And when no clear signal emerged, he put the data aside, hoping to spot a pattern. Time passed. Tsao became a PhD student in the Trondheim lab in 2014. The Mosers shared half a Nobel Prize. Before he graduated. Tsao decided to take another look at his LEC data. 8 years earlier, when he examined the neurons' individual behaviors, it seemed to fire in unstable patterns that made no sense. This time he conducted a different kind of statistical analysis focusing on their combining firing patterns. Then he looked at the data. He developed a hunch that the neurons were involved in representing the passage of time. To test this idea, that's interesting. Through 12 sessions in the black and white boxes, by the time the new experiments were completed, Tsao had moved back to the United States, and from there he ran the statistical analysis again. So it seemed Tsao was analyzing another data set, this one from an experiment in which the rats ran a continuous loop around a figure 8. Oh, that's interesting. In that case, didn't separate the different runs. The activations were piled one top of another. With each individual trial, however, the neurons seemed to mark the animal's progress at different points along the loop. Why does it matter that he's tall, long hair, and soft-spoken? I guess this is artistic license. Then I met him earlier this fall, and I'll describe the explanatory diagrams for me in a copy of paper. Okay, the researchers argue that the neurons in the LEC are creating timestamps that record the order of unfolding events. The fact that the cell's firing patterns change depending on what the animal is experiencing suggests that LEC isn't measuring time like a wristwatch and coding. So it's almost like markers. I would say it's almost like you're reaching milestones. Certain things happen that then, okay, we have to record. This reminds me of American Indian maps, where especially when those that use canoes and stuff like that, the maps many times, they weren't topographical. They were marked as in how long it takes to row a canoe from one point to another. So short distances look different than if it was a longer distance. And so the shapes of things weren't the shape you would see. It was knowing, okay, this lake will take X amount of time to go across by canoe, and things like that, which almost, so these things, the patterns were kind of seem things that were, sporadic. I suppose we might mark a mile, the exact distance every mile, which would be like a wristwatch. But if the terrain was very difficult, that mile might be very long because it takes them a long time to mark off that mile. But if the terrain was very easy, it might be very short distance on the map to tell you, hey, this is easy to walk across to go a mile in. We take for granted our ability to conjure recollections of past events, to answer questions such as, what did you do last weekend? Exactly how the cerebral cortex records that, where and when, of our memories is something neuroscientists have long sought to understand. I can understand that because, it's believed that time is a human invention. It's now believed that grid cells help encode the locations of events in our memory. In a video call, May Britt Moser explained how the LEC network might do the same for the arrangement of events in time. The Mosers still run their lab together, but they divorced in 2016. Oh, that's sad. In the moment, the researchers speculate that the rats could discriminate between one foraging expedition and the next, and so the LEC generated separate timestamps for each one. By contrast, the laps around the figure 8 track were so similar that it's difficult to separate these sequences from each other. And there go the dogs. As a result, the timestamps were overlapped and indistinguishable. Take the same route to work every day, and the trip may blur in your mind. Yeah, unless something significant happens, right? Tsao and the Mosers think the LEC time coding system might underlie our subjective perception of time. When we're busy and engrossed, I would say engaged, time zips by. When we're bored, it inches along. The theory is that our neurons in the hippocampus, the memory center, rely on inputs from the location and time encoding networks in the lateral and medial interhinal cortex. Same cells we imagine get information about. I love it when a scientist says, we imagine, because we don't really know. Once two inputs are mixed together, a memory requires a where and when. Yes, that is true. In recent years, a thriving neuroscience subfield has emerged through the discovery of some kinds of internal clocks in the hippocampal system. Time cells identified by researchers at Boston University in 2011 seem to mark the ticks of a neural clock as seconds elapse. In October, biologists at Northwestern University announced that they found a set of neurons in the medial. This again. Can we call this the MEC? We call the other one the LEC. Why can't this be the MEC? Turn on like a click when an animal is waiting, not a clock when an animal is waiting. And you know what? I know they've done research and experiments with people who perceive time differently. So people will be isolated from a clock and they think an hour has passed. For some people, it's really more like 45 minutes. And other people, it's been like an hour and a half. Yes, your pet can tell time. Tsao's analysts, too, uncovered a few LEC neurons that display timer-like firing patterns. Some cells slowed over the course of each trial in the box experiment, like music boxes winding down. Others waned in the course of the entire 12-trial experiment, which lasted more than an hour. Various neural timekeepers have been studied in the other brains, too. Yet a lively debate also exists amongst the of what these kinds of cells are actually tracking. I'm not even trying to pronounce these. I guess that's Hjorgi Bezeki would be my guess. Neural system enables ensembles of spiking neurons to encode information. A native Hungarian who favors heavy-duty Harry Potter-style glasses, Buzarki, has spent the last several years thinking, writing, and speaking about the puzzles presented by time and the brain, and advertising below me just drive me nuts because it looks like they're making a great meatloaf. Oh my gosh. The experiment observed a neural activity correlating with the measurement of time. Found that proving that a group of neurons that are function of monitoring time or even making the order of events requires showing that other parts of the brain read and use its temporal signal. To most of us, it seems self-evident that our brains must have something like a sense of time, a system for tracking the passage of time analogous to the viral system which detects changes in the visual world. Because, the sun goes around and around. And in particular, when you live in the more northern or more southern latitudes, where the amount of daylight varies quite drastically between high summer and high winter, if you will. I would expect that sense of time to be far more astute and acute, I should say, to someone who lives closer to the equator where it's barely variable at all. No neurons are missing. It's not the tick of an actual clock. Moreover, he argued both time and clocks are cultural constructions, mentions that modern scientists have inherited from their predecessors. Yeah, that I would say, because different cultures have measured time differently. Some by the rising, setting of the sun, the solstices, although that seems to be somewhat universal, but the hours of the day, the Romans did not have a 24-hour day like we do. They had different times, and even what they considered to be months sometimes varied with things. So I'm not that I don't have a problem with that because it's just by what we define to be a day, it happens to be 60 seconds. Although I think that goes back to the Babylonians, if I remember, because they had a base 60 system, 60 seconds. In fact, I think the words seconds and minutes and all that actually derive from them. So 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and then because the way we measure that, it ends up being close to 24 hours in a day. So I'm skipping over some people. The Amazon, Mizaki said, think in terms of change. When tribe members cross life thresholds, such as menstruation or marriage, they have different names, but they have no words for months or years and don't know how old they are. Right, and they live close to the equator too. So the passage of time, their seasons don't vary as much either. And I'm wondering how much that has to deal with, and they're a hunter-gatherer. They're not... and I think, where they are. And I think that has a lot of influence because I imagine a hunter-gatherer culture in more northern climates they have some passage of time that they measure because they know, okay, at this time of the year, our game, these flowers bloom and these berries are available. And then the game follow certain places, but hunter-gatherer in the Amazon, yeah, I wouldn't expect them to, because it's just pretty much all the time is the same. Speaking with Buzaki, I found myself wondering what my brain was actually sensing when I seemed to feel time flowing second by second, minute by minute. I think that's just, you're just not engaged elsewhere. It has to be measuring something else, such as a speed or change or acceleration, for which we do have sensors. In the case that when time is an absolute thing and our brains can track or measure, I don't know. I think he's letting the influence of the culture be a little too heavily swing the pendulum the other way. It's more like an organizational system for making sense of change in the world around us and coordinating. Why is that got an umlaut? Someone mess up. For our lives, of course, time is change. Edvar Moser agreed. Another way to describe his lab's analysis of the LEC could be say that it uncovered changing sequences of activities during episodes of experience. We call it episodic time, or emphasizing it's not a clock time. See, I think that's the problem when they say we need another word. We need a word that's not man-made measured time. It's the sense of passing of the day. The Trondheim group believes that the LEC temporal signal is distributed among thousands of neurons who express time on scales ranging from tens of seconds to more than an hour. For trying to pin down the specific functions of such neurons, and via Skype, the Mosers outlined a few of them. One approach is to block the activity of a rat's LEC, then study how well the animal performed tasks that requires a remembering of sequence events. Examining Alzheimer's patients could also yield clues. Oh, that's interesting. And that's the first part of the brain affected. Problems with navigation or hallmark of the disease. Researchers couldn't interest. It's also it's a lack of, because there's women that can't navigate well, and I don't know if it's testosterone. There's some hormone that actually also helps with that too, but I forget what it is. There's some disorder that some women have. Apparently men cannot get it, but women can. It's still very rare, where they really have no clue where they are. They have no sense of navigation whatsoever. I'm going to skip the rest of that. And so in many ways, however, new findings in the neuroscience of time only discover how little we know. The more we discover, the more we discover, the more we realize we don't know. But the nature of time is an enigma, flummoxing thinkers across the disciplines and the millennium. The paradox that Justinian noted in the 4th century. What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one that asks, I know not. Still holds true today. Neuroscientists are newcomers to this ancient dialogue. Time is one of the most commonly deployed nouns in English, but it has many meanings that must be tensed apart. Do systems in the brain keep clock time, interval time, or some kind of time, some other kind of time? I'd say they probably do all of that depending on the culture. And so your background and this is where nature and nurture, this is a nature and nurture question. So nurturing in this case can affect nature. So you may have an internal time, but then the culture you grow up in, the latitude you are, how other things around you are going to affect that may actually keep an internal clock. How's activity? Because, we measure time by the vibration of atoms, really. I mean, a second is measured by so many vibrations of, I forget which. That's why you have an atomic clock, and it's basically the vibration of the atoms. So there it is. Becomes time becomes a measure of frequency. The amount of frequency that has passed is 1 second. I forget the exact number. How does the activity contribute to our sense of time at all? So anyway, sort knows small conference Costa Rica. We're not okay. So in Ingfei Shin, that'd be my guess. Ingfei Shin. From Northern California, freelance writer. So I don't know. Do we have any? No, we don't have any comments. But that is very interesting. What I like the most is that where the scientists disagree. I don't think the Mosers and Buzaki are in 100%, which is great because then their questions will what they'll probably find out is that they're both right and they're both wrong through more research. If they agreed with one another and said, "Yep, it's case solved science," that's when I get nervous because that's when we turn our brains off and stop learning. So there you go. So what do you think about neurons that tell time? Do you think it's hocus pocus or do you think it's real? All right. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for sharing, and we'll see you. Bye.